Hello YouTube, and welcome again to my channel. This time I wanted to talk a little bit about Jehovah's Witnesses and the use of reasoning and logic, and maybe even their version of love. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses are often told from the platform and in the literature that they're the thinkingest people on the earth. They see the signs of Christ's presence when many people ignore it or don't recognize it, despite the fact that they're perhaps not as educated as many other people in the world. So to them, this is a sign of pride. They think that their ability to see these things and somehow makes them special. Yet that being the case, no doubt you will note that if you've ever had a serious discussion with one of Jehovah's Witnesses and you're able to demonstrate something that goes against their beliefs, they'll either ignore it, or they'll change the subject, or they'll tell you that they'll get back to you with an answer, and oftentimes never will. Well, why is this? The reason is because there's a massive constraint that's placed on their reasoning ability, on their thinking ability, and on their logic. That constraint is as follows. Anything that comes from the organization is basically as good as being the Word of God, and to question anything that comes from the organization is close, almost tantamount to apostasy. Now, there may be witnesses that in private hold their own views on some things, but they typically will not discuss that with others, and they might not completely agree with everything the governing body teaches, but most often they won't make that known. So in cases, though, where they run into things that prove that what they're taught by the Watchtower is not correct, they're left with a dilemma. And that dilemma is that if they accept the truth, in their mind, they could be just about committing an act of apostasy. And if that's not where they're going, a second thing that might happen is they develop this incredible fear that perhaps they have been wrong. And to a Jehovah's Witness, there's a lot more at stake for being wrong than there is for the average populace. What's at stake for a Jehovah's Witness is all of your friends, and most of the times your entire family. If you decide Jehovah's Witnesses are wrong, and if you voice that opinion, you will find yourself talking to elders really fast, or eventually, and you will either have to recant your position or you will be kicked out, and nobody will talk to you anymore, and they will view you as horrible. And on top of this, if you begin to enunciate opinions that are different than those printed in the Watchtower, people will start to view you as spiritually weak or spiritually sick. So there is a massive amount of peer pressure. And keep in mind too, the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses are that if you do not become one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and if you are not one of the servants of Jehovah, you will probably be destroyed at Armageddon. And if you're destroyed at Armageddon, you have no chance of a resurrection. So there's always this fear in the back of their mind. Well, what if the organization's right? Or they think, well, the organization is right about so many other things, I can just let this one slide. So that is basically the way cognitive dissonance works within Jehovah's Witnesses. They see things that disprove their beliefs, and they have to ignore it and put it out of their minds to continue in their happy place of being one of Jehovah's Witnesses, because to focus on that negativity would lead them to doing something they consider to be evil. And in fact, they're told on a regular basis to put any doubts out of their mind. They're told that they should always accept what the organization teaches and what the faithful and discreet slave teaches without question. And if they don't understand it, they are told to wait on Jehovah. Or if they don't agree with it, they are told to wait on Jehovah. So here we see a couple of logical fallacies being employed in argumentation. The first one is the fallacy of argument from authority. And that means that someone says, I'm the authority on this, so what I say has to be correct. That's a fallacy because stating that you're an authority does not prove what you say to be true. You still need to supply proof that what you say is true. So that's logical fallacy number one. Second logical fallacy is a special plea. When they're told to wait on Jehovah, the logic there is that, well, we can't save the argument, so we just have to wait for someone else to explain it. In this case, that someone else is God. And that, once again, is a logical fallacy. If you cannot explain an argument, that doesn't mean you should just assume it's true until someone can prove it's true for you. Arguments require proof. So Jehovah's Witnesses are induced with that guilt and fear by means of logical fallacy. And there's a lot of emotional reasoning going on there too. They're taught that they are part of God's organization. They are a special people. So that makes them feel special. And only God's people are going to be the ones that survive Armageddon. They're going to inherit a paradise earth. They are regularly told that God's people are the happiest people on the planet. They're told that there can be no true happiness outside of God's organization. They're told that life is miserable. Basically, people that are not in Jehovah's organization are viewed as generally corrupt, evil people. The term is used worldly, and it's generally speaking assumed that people who are referred to as being worldly are up to all kinds of things in their life, be it sexual promiscuity, be it drugs, be it drunkenness, theft, what have you. They're just considered not to be good people. In fact, when Jehovah's Witnesses meet good people, their natural inclination is to wonder why that good person is not one of Jehovah's Witnesses, because they are programmed to believe good people will be Jehovah's Witnesses and bad people will not be Jehovah's Witnesses. So that also causes them to think that most people that are Jehovah's Witnesses are good, despite many experiences to the contrary. And it also causes them to think that people who aren't Jehovah's Witnesses are bad, despite many evidences to the contrary. So no doubt you can appreciate this drastically inhibits their thinking and reasoning ability. In fact, I made a point to one friend, and I was going to show him documentation of that point from none other than an Awake article. And the point I made conflicted with current teaching. He refused to even look at the Awake article that made the point I was making at that point. That was not something that I wrote. That was a publication from none other than the organization. And when he was presented with that, something that would disconfirm his belief, despite the fact that it came from the organization, he still wouldn't look at it. And there are a number of other Jehovah's Witnesses like that out there. To an average person, that would be taken as dishonesty. That would be taken as lack of character. That is not truly the best way to classify that on an individual basis. To understand that person's reaction, you have to understand the things that have been done to them and the fear and the guilt that they are experiencing, and the fear and guilt that's caused by anything that might prove to them that Jehovah's Witnesses are not God's organization. So their reaction can only be viewed from that standpoint. And it's unfortunate, but that's kind of the way it is. But a big reason for this is also because of Jehovah's Witnesses' view of love. They are regularly told that they're the most loving group on the planet. Jehovah's organization is the most loving organization there is. They have this worldwide brotherhood to prove it. You can go into any kingdom hall anywhere in the world and say you're a Jehovah's Witness, and you will be able to, on some level, get along with the people there. Now, it might only be superficial. They might put on the show while you're at the meeting and it'll be over, but the mission has been accomplished. You suddenly think that you have friends over there. And in fact, they may invite you over once or twice while you're in that area. And so that brotherhood is reinforced by those actions. But if they stayed in any one area long enough, they would get to know people and discover that people there are no different than people where they currently are. So that's part of the supposed love that Jehovah's Witnesses have. But keep in mind that their love, Jehovah's Witnesses do not believe in unconditional love. To them, that's not true. They may talk about it, but the truth is Jehovah's Witness love is extremely conditional. Their process of disfellowshipping people, in which the disfellowship person is shunned, and not talked to by any of their friends and even family, they consider that to be a loving process. They consider that to be the discipline necessary to correct that person, to bring them back in line to a position where they feel that person can attain salvation. However, that form of discipline goes far beyond what is described in the scriptures, and it can be very arbitrary as to how it's handed out, depending on the body of elders that's involved with the decision, and depending on the person that's involved. So the disfellowshipping practice can vary widely from congregation to congregation, and at times even within a congregation. In fact, I know of a case that involved two people from different congregations. I won't give the specifics, but they were both involved. One of them was more so the aggressor that encouraged the sinful course, and they were in one congregation, and the person that was passive and just kind of went along despite the fact they should have stopped it was in another congregation. The latter individual, the passive one, who just ended up going along, got disfellowshipped. The aggressor that pushed the action and pursued it and encouraged it didn't. So the application of the process is different from place to place, and that is what Jehovah's Witnesses consider to be love. So these individuals who have this warped sense of love go around believing that Jehovah's organization loves them and it's telling them the truth, and that Satan is out to trick them. Therefore, anytime they see something that conflicts with their current beliefs, their mind goes into a mode where right away it has to shut that down and push it out of their thoughts. And they do this on a regular basis. Now, over time, there are individuals who think about it, and they eventually are able to put the dots together. And then they have to decide what to do about it. But many are not. And many can have those experiences over the course of decades and still continue to be Jehovah's Witnesses. So, the long and the short of it is, their thinking is not that of a rational individual, and that is not entirely their fault. That's because they have a very skewed and twisted view of the way things work, because of the guilt and the fear that has been used to indoctrinate their beliefs into them. So that's my video for this time. Take care. Talk to you next time.